Games are pretty expensive, most of them at least, and as one should, we want to feel like the game we bought is worth what we bought it for. Because of that, we want to play the game for at least some time. Nobody wants a 30-minute game with no replay value sold for full price. But can you go too far in the other direction too? Can you make the game that is too long, or more precisely, long in the wrong way? Of course you can. We first need to figure out what makes short games work. Chapter 1. What makes shorter games work? Luigi's Mansion is a pretty short game with about 6 hours in length. To make up for that, the game can be replayed many times, and it will be needed to be replayed several times if the player wants to find every little secret, get the most money, get the best rank on all bosses, and get the best rank at the end of the game. Metal Gear Rising is also known for its short length. With around 6 hours, it similarly has a ton of rankings, unique weapons that may completely change the dynamic of a previous fight, skills you can unlock, and different difficulties that change the game up a lot, with the hardest difficulty being a complete revamp to the game. You can also keep the stuff you unlock when restarting a new game. Chapter 2. Longer games and the sandbox problem. Longer games are also fun. Mario 64 is about 12 to 20 hours in length, depending if you go for 100% completion or not. It has quite a few secrets to find, but pales in comparison to a truly long game, and here's where we hit kind of a roadblock. It is very difficult to accurately calculate the playtime required to beat a sandbox game. Let me explain. Kerbal Space Program's time to beat is apparently around 120 hours. However, that highly depends on how you play the game. The Ultimate Challenge Career Mode contract that asks you to fly by every single body with one rocket seems quite daunting, and is for newer players. As someone who's quite adept at KSP and finds recklessly flying into space with untested vehicles the peak of fun, I believe the challenge isn't that hard, as you should just have some ships that can refuel you, although docking and rendezvous itself is quite hard for new players. The real 100% challenge of KSP, I believe, has never been truly done, which would take a lot more than 120 hours. Truly visiting every special location and biome in the game with proper bases on every body, stations and such. It's truly one part of a larger issue though. I mean, how do you actually beat something like Minecraft? Yeah, you kill the dragon, but who actually stops playing past that unless they're a speedrunner? There's no end to these kinds of games, and I think that's something that's only recently been possible. A game open enough that the player can set their own goals and challenges, yet with consistent rules so the goals feel fair to achieve. If you could just auto-build giant structures in Minecraft, you wouldn't feel a need to build. If you could just teleport in KSP, you wouldn't need to explore. This is the power of sandbox games. Chapter 3. A time before sandbox games. Back before these kinds of games became popular, we had mostly story-driven games that tried to shove a lot of content into themselves. The greatest example of a game that is too long for its own good is Donkey Kong 64. It takes 30 hours to beat it. It has a lot of collectibles that are color-coded just to make the game longer, as now you have to backtrack to get the correct character and pick them up again. You have tons of abilities that are only really used to unlock one specific area or do one specific thing, and don't see much use past that. It's overall quite tedious. This is the kind of limitation the Nintendo 64 had faced because of its small cartridge size. Yeah, StarCraft 64 took 88 hours to beat, which sounds like a lot, but considering it's an isometric RTS, you can see how the storage space was not as big of an issue with StarCraft as it was with Donkey Kong 64, with both games using the 32MB cartridge size. So, short and replayable games can be great if they're worth replaying, but how come StarCraft can be almost 3 times the length of Donkey Kong 64? Yet Donkey Kong 64 is seen as the shit one. Well, to answer that, we'll need to go back to the NES days. Chapter 4. Storage limitations. If the 32MB of cartridge space taken up by StarCraft wasn't cramped enough, or the 12MB of Mario Kart 64, or the Dr. Mario cartridge, which was 4MB, the NES's cartridge sizes were so much smaller. Super Mario Bros. Is 40KB, that's 0.04 MB. Castlevania is 65 kilobytes, Castlevania 3 was 241 kilobytes. The largest game was Kirby's Adventure at 471 kilobytes. So, how do we make the game longer? Well, Ninja Gaiden's 137 kilobytes can be extended just by making the game harder to beat. Castlevania 2's 76 kilobytes can be expanded with backtracking. Contra's 88 kilobytes can be expanded by just making the game as hard as balls, and that's kind of the trick. In some games, when you died, you'd be sent back to the title screen. No saving feature, no nothing. Once you die, that's it. Games back then were seen more as things you'd play for fun until you'd eventually beat them, and then you play them again. Games were played to be mastered and not played to be beaten. But that was not because the players chose to master them. Games were more expensive, and once you had a game, it was either playing that game or not playing games. As we entered into the SNES era, games became more approachable. They had on-cartridge saves, they were intended to be beaten on their own, and unlike some NES games that required you to buy Nintendo Power Editions that talk about it because of obscure hidden shit you would definitely not find on your own, what was once a necessity to lengthen the amount of time you'd spend with the game, partially to make it so you couldn't beat it and return it in the time required if it was a rental back then, is not needed anymore. Backtracking, because you lack storage space on the disc or cartridge, is also no longer a thing, and neither ups the difficulties, most of the time. Now, we need to talk about Tedium. Chapter 5. Tedium. Tedium in games, I'd argue, is an arbitrary way of making the player waste time. Like grinding for loot in a gacha game. But mechanics that can be tedious in one game are fair in another game. In Mudrunner, going slowly from A to B and then back to A feels fair. Your truck can only go so fast with the mud. Have you run out of fuel or rolled over due to bad planning, so you have to send a rescue vehicle? That's kinda your fault and nobody else's. It fits the game and doesn't feel tedious. If you took Genshin Impact, axed the store, and made summoning new characters and leveling up consistent, you would have a much better, but way less profitable game. And that's the point nowadays. Money. Chapter 6. The problem with modern games. Games have become arguably worse, because instead of Tedium being in backtracking or difficulty, they've started padding for time by adding tedious things to slow you down. Battle passes, pay-to-win items, loot boxes, and other items that are meant to lengthen the amount of time you spend in a game to the point where it's nearly the only game you play. There are psychologists right now working on games that specifically calculate how to make the most exploitative game possible. It also gets worse than this. Progression has also been ruined by the Battle Pass system. What was once a cool skin you get for surviving like 15 rounds in a zombie game mode has just become another skin you get for reaching level 47 of the Battle Pass, losing value in the eyes of the player base. It's no longer a skin you gain by being good in the game, it's a skin you gain just by playing the game or just by outright buying it. There's also another thing with how Battle Passes work. They're only letting you play for a limited amount of time. They make you feel FOMO, fear of missing out. If you're not consistently grinding the Battle Pass that you paid for, you'll lose out on so many cool items and cosmetics, so people continue playing the game more and more because they'll feel like they've wasted their money. It's definitely not over yet though. Chapter 7. The solution? Single-player games that are complete and enjoyable experiences have still been releasing, even today. But you don't even need to play new games anymore. Go play an older one. Most of the time, 20-year-old games either run fine on PC or need a community-made patch to fix a compatibility issue. Hell, you could even buy an old PC for like $60 that would have absolutely no issues running them. Some can even be found on Steam or GOG, where most of the time they run flawlessly. Emulating can still be a hit or miss with some of the new systems like the PlayStation 3, 360, Switch, but a lot of games and consoles are extremely playable even on an older machine. A mid-range phone nowadays can even run some GameCube and Wii games. Obviously, and definitely not for legal reasons, if you want to emulate, please dump your own legitimately obtained games from your own legitimately obtained console. Never pirate, you're literally stealing money from a mega corporation's mouth by pirating a 20-year-old GameCube game that has never seen a re-release since it was made once. What was the point of this video? Oh yeah, Tedium is bad. Short games get value from playing them, and long games can be fun if they're not tedious. Live service games suck, and playing older games can be really fun. Thanks for coming to my... It's not even a fucking TED Talk, is it? It's like a TEDx talk. It's worse. I was gonna put the Minecraft Phantom somewhere into this video, but I think it's better to keep it somewhere else. I had a video about watching old Herobrine sighting videos that I put on hold so I could make this because I thought it'd be interesting. Goodbye?